Okay. So, what the last couple days we've been doing factoring. So on Tuesday, when I give you that quiz on Tuesday, I'm not going to have a question where I say just factor. I'm going to have you solve a polynomial or find the zeros for the roots. Okay? So all leading into what we did today are at the bottom of the last two worksheets. So we want to find the roots. We're going to ignore this part for today. We are finding zeros. We're finding zeros. Where do we put the zero here? Yeah, so the f of x or our y value is 0. That's what that means. And so we have x to the fourth minus 8x squared minus 9. So what do we do there to solve that? Factor, that's right. So we're looking at
minus 9, minus 8.
minus 9 and negative 8. And then what numbers work there?
91. 91. It's negative 9.
So Trace, tell me what to do next. X squared minus 9 and x squared plus 1. Good. And so now what's our next step here?
0. Zero product.
Good. Zero product property. X squared minus 9 is equal to 0. X squared plus 1 equals 0. I think I heard somebody say you could factor again. Yeah, so you could do that also on this one. But if we do square roots, that'll take care of it. So that works also. Doesn't matter. Give you the same answer. So now on this here, if we use square roots, we would add 9 then. X squared is 9. And then what next?
X squared. No, square.
Square root. And we get x equals 3 and negative 3. And then on this one,
Equals minus 1.
minus the 1. So x squared is negative 1. And then what undoes that square? Square root. And we get x equals
Positive 1 and minus 1.
So remember, it's a square root of a negative 1. So it's an I and a negative I. So my roots are going to be 3, negative 3, I, and negative I. How many roots do I have? My answer? 4. What's the degree of the polynomial? 4. So they should match. So that's one way for you to check. Okay, so same thing on this one. First, we're going to set it equal to 0. And how do we solve this one? Okay, factoring by grouping. What told you that, Shireen, that you needed to do that? Good. So when there's 4 terms there, you're going to want to do your factoring by grouping. So you group and then factor each one of those groups. So what's the greatest common factor here in this group? X squared. So x squared times x plus 1. And then what can we factor out of the second one? Negative 5. Good, because we want to make them the same. We want to make them both x plus 1. So we have to factor out that negative 5 there. So now my next step is writing it as 2 sets of parentheses. And what would that be? Allie. Did you say x squared minus 5? Okay. And then what do we do next here on this? Okay. Zero product property. So we set x plus 1 equals 0. X squared minus 5 is 0. This gives us a negative 1. And then we add 5. X squared is 5. And then what next? Lily, what would we do next here? Good. And what do we get? And is that it? Just square root 5? It's going to be 2 answers. What's my other answer? Good. Negative. And if you want to write plus and minus there, that's fine too. So we have negative 1, square root 5, and negative square root 5. So we have how many zeros there? 3. And so the degree on that polynomial is 3. So they match. Okay, go ahead and do the U-try.
And yes, more feet.
Sorry. Yo. Talk about this. So excited.
Any questions on that? Okay, on to the next example. Okay, so what do we do on number 4? Some confusion about this today, so what do we do on this one?
Double square, bro.
That's right.
You know what to do? So I've had that every single period someone has said that. The reason you don't want to square root it is it's not a square. But I know it looks similar to what we did before. So we want to factor it. So we're going to factor it. Pay attention. Quiet, please. So how would we factor it? X squared plus 4, x squared minus 4. Does that make sense? Okay, so now we're going to use our zero product property. X squared plus 4 is 0. X squared minus 4 is 0. Isolate our x squared. And we get -2. So what would the square root of -4 be? 2i and -2i. I know, you have to pay attention to the details on this, huh? And we get x squared is 4. So 2 and -2. So how many zeros do we have? Or roots? 4. And what's our degree? 4. So they match. Okay, number 5 is a little different. What is different about number 5? So it's got an x to the third, 5x to the third minus 21x squared plus 4x. So it doesn't have a fourth term. It only has 3 terms. We have to factor. How do we factor this one? Is there something else we have to do first? Notice that that's a 4x. We have to factor out a greatest common factor. So what's our greatest common factor? X. So we're first going to factor out an x. So what would I get when I factor out an x? Nate, tell us what we get. Uh-huh.
Minus 21x.
Good. So now we're going to ignore that x temporarily, and then we're going to finish factoring this here. So how are we going to do that? Use the x? 5 times 4. Yeah, 5 times 4, or 20. What multiplies to 20? That adds to -21. Yep, -20 and -1. And then what next? Easy to forget this step. Good. You want to divide by 5 because we took 5 times 4 to make this work here. So we got to get that 5 out of there. So this would be x times x minus 4, and then we're going to slide this 5 to the front of the x, 5x minus 1. So now we want to do what? Zero product property. X is 0. X minus 4 is 0. 5x minus 1 is 0. Questions on where I got this x is 0? Here, we've got 3 different factors there. So we have 3 different equations to solve. So this one's already solved for us. This gives us 4. Add 1, 5x is 1. And we get x is 1/5. So 0, 4, and 1/5.